The wind howls through abandoned corridors, metal creaking in the darkness. The camera pans across a desolate military facility overtaken by nature. Rusted chain-link fences, concrete bunkers with faded government markings, warning signs barely legible after decades of neglect. A school janitor at 42 inherits a forgotten Cold War military base, only to become the laughingstock of his entire town. What happens when this ordinary man discovers a national secret worth billions buried within this ridiculed property? In those darkened halls, a forgotten treasure lies waiting, one that could not only change his destiny, but the power balance of America itself. As documents from the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 begin to surface, an old intelligence network awakens. The camera zooms in on a faded photograph, men in military uniforms standing before a concrete structure, one face eerily familiar. This is the extraordinary story of loyalty, betrayal, in an ordinary man standing at the crossroads of history and present day. The choices he makes will echo through corridors of power once thought long abandoned. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what happens next. The morning bell at Eagle Point High School rings through empty hallways. It's 6:15 a.m. and Marcus Reynolds pushes his mop bucket down the main corridor, the squeak of his work boots echoing against the metal lockers. At 42, his hands are calloused from 15 years of scrubbing floors, fixing leaky pipes, and collecting the forgotten debris of teenagers who barely register his existence. His faded blue uniform hangs loose on his frame, patched at the elbows where it's worn thin. The name badge reads simply Reynolds. No title, no first name. He doesn't need one. The kids call him Old Mop Bucket behind his back, and the teachers leave their coffee spills for him without so much as a nod of acknowledgement. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead, so Marcus wipes down the trophy case. Eagle Point's football championships gleam behind the glass, moments of glory that belong to others. His reflection stares back, graying at the temples lines etched around his eyes that weren't there when he started this job. In another life, he might have been something else. In this one, he's invisible. Principal Garfield strides past expensive shoes clicking on the freshly mopped floor, leaving a trail of dirty footprints without a second glance. Reynolds, the boys' bathroom on the second floor is backed up again. Handle it before first period. No good morning, no please, just another order. Marcus nods. Yes, sir, I'll take care of it. He always does. By lunchtime, the cafeteria is a war zone of spilled milk and discarded pizza. Marcus works methodically, cleaning each table as students filter out for afternoon classes. A half-eaten sandwich sails through the air, landing at his feet. Laughter erupts from a table of Letterman jackets. 10 points, a voice calls out. Hey, Mop Bucket, thanks for the cleanup. Marcus picks up the sandwich without comment and drops it in his trash bag. He's learned that silence is easier than dignity in these halls. After school, Marcus is the last to leave, checking every door, every window. It's his responsibility, one he takes seriously even if no one notices. His ancient pickup truck, a '79 Ford that's more rust than paint, coughs to life in the empty parking lot. The dashboard clock is permanently stuck at 4:17, but Marcus knows it's closer to 7. The truck rattles down Main Street in Pinecrest, a once prosperous town, now faded like an old photograph. The steel mill closed in '92 and nothing moved in to replace it. The diner still serves the same coffee it did 20 years ago, and the men who gather there still tell the same stories. Marcus parks outside his apartment building, a 3-story walk-up that might have been grand in the 1950s. His unit is on the second floor, one bedroom with a view of the brick wall next door. The rent takes half his paycheck, but it's clean and it's his. He checks his mailbox out of habit, not expecting anything beyond bills and flyers. Today there's an envelope that doesn't belong, heavy cream paper with his name typed formally, Marcus James Reynolds. The return address reads, Hargrove Wilkins and Peterson Attorneys at Law. Marcus turns the envelope over in his rough hands, feeling its weight before opening it carefully at his kitchen table. The letter inside is equally formal, the language stiff and official. Dear Mr. Reynolds, as the designated executor of the estate of Colonel Robert J. Reynolds, United States Army, retired, I regret to inform you of his passing on April 17, 2025. As his sole surviving heir, you are hereby bequeathed the property known as Sentinel Ridge Facility, including all its structures, contents, and associated land, approximately 142 acres as per the last will and testament of Colonel Reynolds. Marcus reads the letter twice, then a third time. Uncle Robert, a man he hasn't seen in 20 years, the black sheep of the family who disappeared into government work and resurfaced occasionally for Christmas with pockets full of candy and stories he couldn't finish. The uncle who always ruffled Marcus's hair and said, "You're smarter than you know, kid." And now he's dead and has left Marcus a military base. The next paragraph explains that Sentinel Ridge was a former government installation decommissioned in 1986 and purchased by Colonel Reynolds from the military auction. The property is located 12 miles outside Pinecrest in the foothills that give the town its name. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange the transfer of deed and property access. Marcus sets the letter down, runs a hand through his thinning hair. His apartment suddenly feels smaller, the walls pressing in. He opens the refrigerator, 3 beers, half a loaf of bread, some lunch meat approaching its expiration date. He takes a beer, twists the cap off with practiced ease. His uncle, a military base. It doesn't make sense. The next morning at the Pinecrest Diner, Marcus nurses a cup of coffee, the letter folded in his pocket. He's read it a dozen more times since last night, and it still doesn't seem real. The bell above the door jingles. Victor Hammond strides in, all 6'2" of him, filling the doorway before he ducks inside. Hammond owns the auto shop on Main Street, drives a truck twice the size of Marcus's, and makes sure everyone knows his business is the only one in town still turning a profit. "Well, well," Hammond's voice carries across the diner. "If it isn't the newest property owner in Pinecrest." Marcus stiffens. News travels fast in small towns. Hammond slides into the booth across from him uninvited. "Heard you got yourself a real estate windfall, Reynolds. Old man Hargrove was talking about it at the Elk Lodge last night." Marcus says nothing, takes another sip of coffee. "Sentinel Ridge." Hammond leans forward, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "You know what that place is, right? Cold War relic. Government dumping ground. Your uncle was the only one crazy enough to buy it when they shut it down. It was his. Now it's mine," Marcus says simply. Hammond barks a laugh. "What are you going to do with it? Turn it into a tourist trap? Come see the saddest hole in the ground in Pennsylvania." He smirks. "I'll give you $5,000 for it right now. Save you the trouble of dealing with all those permits and inspections." "Not for sale." $10,000 then. Final offer." Hammond's eyes narrow. "Trust me, Reynolds. That place is nothing but a liability. Contaminated land, crumbling buildings. The government left it to rot for a reason." Marcus meets his gaze. "I said it's not for sale." Something shifts in Hammond's expression. Annoyance, maybe curiosity. "Your funeral." He slides out of the booth. "When you change your mind, and you will, you know where to find me." The diner has gone quiet, everyone pretending not to listen. As Hammond leaves, the whispers start. Marcus can feel the eyes on him, hear the murmurs. Poor Reynolds. Thinks he's hit the jackpot. Doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. By the time he gets to work, the story has reached Eagle Point High. The teachers exchange glances in the hallway. The students are less subtle. "Hey, mop bucket," a senior calls out as Marcus cleans the water fountain. "Heard you inherited Area 51, gonna introduce us to your alien friends." More laughter. Marcus keeps his head down, keeps working. But the jokes follow him throughout the day. "Reynolds, is it true?" Principal Garfield stops him in the afternoon. "You've inherited some old military property." Marcus nods. "Well," Garfield clears his throat. "Congratulations, I suppose. Though I hear it's quite dilapidated." "I haven't seen it yet, sir." "Yes, well," Garfield straightens his tie. "Just make sure it doesn't interfere with your duties here. We're counting on you to keep things running smoothly." As if a janitor could ever be irreplaceable. After his shift, Marcus drives past his apartment, continuing straight down Route 16 toward the foothills. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the road as it winds upward, the trees growing denser on either side. A faded sign marks a turn-off, restricted area, government property, no trespassing. The sign is bent, partially covered with graffiti. Someone has spray-painted "Mutants Inside" across the bottom. Marcus turns onto the gravel road, his truck bouncing over potholes and exposed roots. The road narrows, climbing higher into the hills until it ends at a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. A gate blocks the entrance, secured with a heavy padlock that looks newer than its surroundings. Beyond the fence, Marcus can see concrete buildings nestled into the hillside, gray utilitarian structures with few windows. Some are partially buried in the earth. Others stand exposed, their surfaces weathered by decades of rain and snow. A large radar dish sits atop the largest building, frozen in position, pointing at a sky it no longer monitors. This is Sentinel Ridge. This is his inheritance. Marcus sits in his truck for a long moment, engine idling, hands tight on the steering wheel. Then he reaches for the envelope on the passenger seat. Inside, along with the letter, is a single key, heavy brass, old-fashioned, the kind that opens serious locks. He approaches the gate cautiously as if it might be electrified. The padlock is solid, well-maintained. The key slides in, smoothly turns with a satisfying click. The chain falls away and Marcus pushes the gate open with a screech of metal that echoes through the trees. No alarm sound. No guards appear, just silence and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. The main building looms ahead, a two-story concrete bunker with SR1 stenciled beside its heavy metal door. Smaller structures fan out around it. Storage sheds, equipment housings, what might have been barracks. All wear the same gray uniformity, all carry the weight of abandonment. Marcus tries the key in the main door. Another click, another entrance granted. He pushes the door open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. The air that rushes out is cool, stale, carrying the scent of old paper and machinery, long dormant. He fumbles for a light switch, finds one beside the door. To his surprise, it works. Fluorescent lights flicker to life overhead and illuminating a reception area frozen in time. A desk with a government-issue chair. Filing cabinets against one wall. A large seal on the opposite wall, partially obscured by dust, but Marcus can make out an eagle and shield. "What were you doing here, Uncle Robert?" he mutters. A hallway leads deeper into the building. More lights come on as Marcus finds more switches. The corridor branches, left toward offices, right toward what looks like a command center. He chooses right. The room he enters is larger, circular, with workstations arranged in concentric rings around a central platform. Dust-covered monitors, rotary phones, map displays. The technology is dated, late 70s, early 80s at the most recent. On the walls, maps of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, marking installations, missile sites, troop movements. Red pins and blue pins frozen in an eternal standoff. This was a listening post, a monitoring station, part of America's early warning system. Marcus moves to the central platform. A desk there is larger than the others, clearly for someone in charge. The nameplate reads COO R.J. Reynolds Commanding. His uncle's desk, his uncle's command. He opens a drawer, finds it empty. Another contains only paper clips and rubber bands. The third is locked. Marcus tries his key, but it doesn't fit. He searches the desk's surface, running his fingers along its edges underneath. His knuckle catches on something, a small lever hidden beneath the lip of the desk. He pulls it, and a soft click comes from the locked drawer. Now it slides open easily. Inside lies a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth from handling. Marcus opens it carefully. The first page bears his uncle's name and a date, September 12, 1962. The handwriting is precise, military in its neatness. The first entry reads, "Assigned to Sentinel Ridge, effective immediately. Project Granite Shadow requires secure comms and monitoring capabilities away from Washington. General Curtis made it clear. This facility reports directly to SAE, bypassing normal chain of command. Unusual, but these are unusual times. Cuban situation deteriorating." Marcus flips forward. Pages of observations, reports, technical details about equipment installations. His uncle's dry wit occasionally breaking through the professional language. Octi 15, 1962. Radar finally calibrated properly. Technician Collins insisted nothing was wrong with it for 3 days until I made him climb up and adjust it himself. Amazing how problems solve themselves when the right person is inconvenienced. Then a marked change in tone. Octi 22, 1962. President's speech tonight. Blockade of Cuba announced. We are now at DEFCON 3. Round-the-clock monitoring in effect. Team is nervous but functioning well. First real test of the facility. OST 24, 1962, DEFCON 2. Soviet ships approaching blockade line. Haven't slept in 36 hours. Coffee supplies, critical. Oct. 26, 1962. Something isn't right. Received transmission from Andrews coded Ascension. No such protocol exists in our command books. When I questioned authenticity, told to follow orders and maintain protocol silence. General's authentication code checks out, but this isn't standard procedure. Have logged objection. Oct. 27, 1962. Granite Shadow is not what they told us. God help me, I've seen the actual orders. This isn't defense, it's first strike, unauthorized. The president doesn't know. The entry ends abruptly. The next page has been torn out. Several pages are missing. When the journal resumes, the date is November 10, 1962. Facility being decommissioned. Official reason, strategic realignment. Real reason, I know too much. They're burying Granite Shadow, but not deep enough. I've secured the evidence. They'll never find it where I've hidden it. The final entry, dated December 1st, 1962. Offered early retirement with full benefits and ownership of this facility in recognition of distinguished service. In other words, keep quiet and disappear. I'm taking the deal, but not for the reasons they think. Sentinel Ridge still has a purpose. The shadow remains waiting for light. Marcus closes the journal, his heart pounding. This isn't just an abandoned listening post. This is something else. Something his uncle protected or hid for decades. A noise startles him, a metallic groan from somewhere deep in the facility, then silence again. Old buildings make sounds, he tells himself. They settle, they breathe. He tucks the journal into his jacket and continues exploring. Beyond the command center, more hallways branch in different directions. Signs mark different sections. Communications, analysis, barracks, storage. Marcus chooses storage, following the arrow down a narrower corridor. The doors here are heavier reinforced. Some are marked with faded radiation symbols or chemical hazard warnings. Others simply read, "Authorized personnel only." At the end of the hall stands a door different from the others, steel with a combination lock rather than a keyhole. Beside it, a faded plaque reads, "SR Shadow Archive, Granite Shadow," the project his uncle mentioned. Marcus examines the lock. No way to open this without the combination. He runs his hands along the frame looking for hidden mechanisms like the one on the desk. Nothing. Returning to the command center, he searches his uncle's desk more thoroughly. The surface is bare except for an old rotary phone and a pencil holder containing dried-out pens. He checks under the blotter inside the other drawers again. In the back of the bottom drawer, his fingers find a seam in the wood. False bottom. He pries it up to reveal a small compartment containing a single item, a black and white photograph. The image shows 5 men in military uniforms standing before the entrance to Sentinel Ridge. Marcus recognizes his uncle immediately. Younger, sharper, but with the same steady gaze. The other faces are unfamiliar except one, a man who bears a striking resemblance to Marcus himself. He turns the photo over. Written on the back in his uncle's hand, Project Granite Shadow Team, left to right, Majay. Williams, Captain Reynolds, Self-Lieutenant. Reynolds, James, Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Blackwood. October 1962. Lieutenant Reynolds, James. His father. Marcus stares at the photo, his mind racing. His father had never mentioned serving here. Never mentioned working with Uncle Robert. According to family stories, James Reynolds had been a mechanic stationed in Germany during the Cold War, returning home to work in the steel mill until his death in a factory accident when Marcus was 10. Nothing about secret military installations. Nothing about Project Granite Shadow. The photograph trembles in Marcus's hands. He's standing in the same spot where this picture was taken more than 60 years later, learning his family history is built on lies. On the back of the photo, beneath the names, a series of numbers is written in faint pencil, 2714-03-1962. A combination. Marcus returns to the locked door of the Shadow Archive. He spins the dial carefully. 27, right, 14 left, 03 right, 19 left, 62 right. A click. The handle turns. The door opens into darkness deeper than the rest of the facility. Marcus feels along the wall for a light switch, but finds none. From his pocket, he takes out his keychain flashlight, small but bright enough to cut through the gloom. The beam reveals shelves of file boxes, equipment cases, and at the center of the room, a large object covered by a heavy tarp. The air is noticeably cooler here, as if the room is climate-controlled. Marcus approaches the covered object, grips the edge of the tarp, and pulls. Dust billows as the cover falls away, revealing a large metal container, approximately the size of a refrigerator. Its surface is brushed steel with no markings except a small keypad and display on the front panel. The display is dark, but a tiny green light beside the keypad indicates the device has power. This isn't 1960s technology. This looks more recent, 1980s, maybe early 90s. Marcus examines the container without touching it. No obvious way to open it. No hints about what might be inside. He turns his attention to the shelves, instead pulling down a file box labeled Shadow Documentation. Inside technical manuals, schematics, in a thin folder marked Executive Summary. Marcus opens this last item, finding a cover sheet with a classification level he's never seen before. Beyond Top Secret. The date is October 1962. Project Granite Shadow Development of Rhodium-103 isotope for strategic applications. The document describes a rare metal, rhodium, and an experimental process to create a specific isotope with unique superconductive properties at ambient temperature. The technical language grows complex, but the applications are clear enough. Weapon systems, guidance, technology, communications that could not be jammed or intercepted. Estimated value of single production runs 750 1962 USD POM. Total program allocation 1.2 B. A fortune, buried in this forgotten facility. Marcus continues reading his flashlight beam steady on the yellowed pages. Production status: initial test batch completed October 19, 1962. Full promotional production schedule pending executive approval. Executive approval. From the president, approval that according to his uncle's journal was never given. Deeper in the documentation, Marcus finds black and white photographs of laboratory equipment, test results, and a group of men in lab coats gathered around what appears to be an early prototype of the container now sitting in front of him. One photo shows his father, much younger but unmistakable, making adjustments to some kind of specialized equipment. In the background, a blackboard covered with equations and molecular diagrams. Another folder contains personnel files, heavily redacted, but with enough information to piece together the core team. Dr. David Sullivan, nuclear physicist; Dr. Richard Blackwood, materials science; Major Thomas Williams, security and operations; and the Reynolds brothers, Captain Robert handling communications and Lieutenant James as weapons systems specialist. None of this matches what Marcus knew about his father. The factory worker, the quiet man who taught him how to fix a carburetor, but never spoke of his military service. The man who died in an industrial accident when a steel press malfunctioned, crushing him instantly. At least that was the official story. Marcus's hands tremble as he returns the files to their box. The magnitude of what he's discovering is overwhelming. His uncle and father were involved in something big, something dangerous enough that they felt the need to hide it for decades. A page from a technical manual catches his eye, a diagram of the container showing its internal structure. According to the schematic, it's a specialized storage unit designed to maintain perfect temperature, humidity, and radiation shielding. Inside would be dozens of small cylinders, each containing a carefully measured amount of rhodium-103. The manual describes the material's properties in technical terms that Marcus can barely follow, but one passage stands out. R-103 exhibits unprecedented quantum stability at ambient temperatures, allowing for sustainable entanglement across theoretically unlimited distances. Initial tests confirm superconductivity without cryogenic requirements. Military applications include but are not limited to undetectable communications, electromagnetic pulse resistance, and guidance systems immune to jamming or interception. In layman's terms, a miracle material, something that could change warfare forever. Another document outlines deployment scenarios, targets in Cuba, response times, expected casualties. The cold clinical language makes Marcus's stomach turn. This wasn't defensive. This was a first strike plan disguised as a contingency. He's so engrossed in the documents that he almost misses the first sound. A faint scrape of metal against metal somewhere in the facility. Then another. Footsteps. Marcus freezes, clicks off his flashlight. Darkness envelops him. The footsteps grow closer, deliberate. not the random creaks of an old building. Someone else is in the facility. He slides the documents back into their box, returns it to the shelf as silently as possible. The tarp lies on the floor where he dropped it. No time to replace it. He moves to the side of the door, pressing himself against the wall, heart hammering in his chest. The footsteps stop outside the archive. A beam of light sweeps through the partially open door, playing across the shelves, the containers, the exposed metal box at the center of the room. In here, a woman's voice, low and urgent. More footsteps join the first. At least two people. Is that it? A male voice now. Has to be. Signal's coming from inside that container. Signal. What signal? Reynolds said it would be locked down tight. That's why we brought the override codes. Stand back. Marcus holds his breath. These people know his name or his uncle's. They know about the container. They have codes. The woman enters first. Tall, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wears civilian clothes, jeans, hiking boots, a dark jacket, but moves with military precision. The flashlight in her hand is tactical grade, much brighter than Marcus's keychain light. The man follows. Older, gray-haired, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a tweed jacket that screams academic rather than soldier. He carries a tablet device that glows blue in the darkness. They approach the container, unaware of Marcus pressed against the wall behind them. Power's still on, the woman notes, examining the keypad. After all these years. Reynolds was thorough, the man replies. Independent generator system probably buried deeper in the mountain. The colonel thought of everything, except dying before passing on the activation codes. The woman gestures to the tablet. Do you have them or not? The man taps at his device. Trying the first sequence now. He reads off numbers as the woman inputs them on the keypad. Nothing happens. Try the second set. More numbers. Still nothing. I thought you said these would work. Frustration edges the woman's voice. These are the override codes from Reynolds's Pentagon file. They should work unless... The man pauses. Unless he changed them. He was paranoid enough. Great. The woman runs a hand through her hair. So we came all this way for nothing. Not necessarily. We could... Marcus's foot scuffs against the floor as he shifts his weight. The sound is tiny, but in the quiet room it might as well be a gunshot. Both intruders whirl toward him, the woman's flashlight beam catching him full in the face. Marcus throws up a hand to shield his eyes. Who's there? The woman demands. Step out, slowly. Marcus considers running but knows he wouldn't get far. Instead, he steps forward, blinking against the harsh light. I'm Marcus Reynolds. This is my property. A moment of silence. The flashlight lowers slightly. Marcus Reynolds, the woman repeats. Colonel Robert Reynolds' nephew. Yes, who are you and why are you breaking into my facility? The woman and man exchange glances. I'm Dr. Elaine Sullivan, Department of Defense. She doesn't offer identification. This is Dr. Harper. We're here on official business. Marcus's mind races. Sullivan, the name from the photograph. Related to Dr. Sullivan, who worked here in 1962. Another glance between the intruders. The man, Dr. Harper, speaks up. Elaine is David Sullivan's daughter. I worked with your uncle in the Pentagon's Historical Review Division. We're not breaking in, Mr. Reynolds. We're retrieving classified material that was never properly decommissioned. With all due respect, Marcus says, finding a steadiness in his voice that surprises him. This facility and everything in it belongs to me now. My uncle left it to me in his will. I have the paperwork. Your uncle's ownership was conditional, Elaine Sullivan says. Certain materials remained government property. That container is one of them. Then why sneak in? Why not knock on the front door and show me some official paperwork? Sullivan's expression hardens. It's complicated. I'm starting to see that. Marcus steps further into the room. What's in the container? What's rhodium-103 really for? Their surprise is visible even in the dim light. You've been reading classified documents, Sullivan says. It's not a question. My documents now. Marcus stands straighter. My uncle kept a journal, mentioned Project Granite Shadow, said it wasn't what they told him it was, said he hid evidence. Harper removes his glasses, pinches the bridge of his nose. Colonel Reynolds was a complicated man with strong opinions about certain military decisions during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He thought someone was planning a first strike without presidential authorization, Marcus says. That's not an opinion. That's treason. Sullivan's flashlight beam doesn't waver, but her voice drops. You have no idea what you're talking about. Those were complicated times requiring difficult decisions. Then explain it to me. Marcus gestures around the archive room. All of it. Why my uncle spent decades guarding this place. Why my father was here too. Why none of you thought I deserved to know. A new sound interrupts. A steady beeping from the metal container. The small display has illuminated, showing a series of numbers counting down. What did you do? Sullivan asks sharply. Nothing, Marcus says. I never touched it. Harper moves to the container, studying the display. It's an automated sequence. Must have triggered when the archive door opened with the correct combination. What kind of sequence? Sullivan joins him. Verification protocol. Harper points to blinking text on the display. It's scanning for authorized personnel. As if on cue, a thin beam of light emerges from the top of the container, sweeping across the room. It passes over Sullivan and Harper, then stops on Marcus. The beam turns from white to green. DNA confirmation, Reynolds MJ. A mechanical voice speaks from the container. Voice print required for final authorization. Marcus stares at the container. It knows who I am. Your uncle must have programmed it, Harper says, astonishment clear in his voice. Probably used DNA from your father to create a partial match pattern. It's recognizing you as family. Say your full name, Sullivan instructs. Clearly. Marcus steps forward, uncertain but drawn by a pull he can't explain. Marcus James Reynolds. The container hums, the display changes. The display, identity confirmed. Welcome, Lieutenant Reynolds. Lieutenant Reynolds, his father's rank. The container thinks he's his father. With a series of mechanical clicks, the front panel of the container splits down the middle and slides open. Cold vapor billows out, obscuring the contents momentarily. As it clears, Marcus can see rows of metal cylinders, each about the size of a soda can, nestled in foam padding. My God, Sullivan breathes. It's all here. The entire production run, Harper agrees, exactly where Reynolds said he hid it. In the center of the cylinders sits a small lockbox. The lid is open, revealing a stack of microfilm reels and what looks like a mini recorder from the 1960s. The evidence, Marcus says quietly, the proof of what they were planning. Sullivan reaches for the lockbox, but Marcus is faster. He grabs it, steps back. Not so fast. This stays with me until I know exactly what's going on. Sullivan's expression darkens. You're interfering with a national security matter. No, Marcus counters. I'm protecting my uncle's legacy and my father's. The standoff is broken by a new sound, vehicles approaching outside tires on gravel. Multiple vehicles from the sound of it. Harper moves to a small window, high on the archive wall, peers out. Black SUVs, government plates. That's not us, Sullivan says, frowning. We came alone. Then who? Marcus begins. Blackwood, Sullivan cuts him off. Alexander Blackwood. He must have tracked our access to the Pentagon files on Granite Shadow. Who's Blackwood? Harper answers, his voice grim. Dr. Richard Blackwood's son, the last surviving member of the original project team besides your uncle, and the last person who should get his hands on this material. Outside car doors slam, voices call out orders. Sullivan makes a decision. Harper, help me secure these cylinders. Reynolds, you have two choices. Come with us and bring that evidence, or stay and explain to Blackwood's men why you're trespassing on restricted government property. This is my property, Marcus insists. Not for long if Blackwood has his way, Sullivan says. He's been searching for this facility for years. He has resources connections in Washington. Once he claims national security, your inheritance won't matter. Footsteps outside, approaching the main entrance. Marcus clutches the lockbox tighter. His uncle hid this material for a reason, protected it for decades. Now it's his responsibility. Where would we go, he asks. I have a safe house, Sullivan says. Somewhere we can examine the evidence properly and decide what to do next. How do I know I can trust you? Sullivan's expression softens slightly. You don't, but I'm not the one arriving with a tactical team to seize your property. A loud bang echoes through the facility, someone forcing the main door. Decision time, Mr. Reynolds, Harper says urgently. Marcus thinks of his uncle's journal, of his father in that photograph, of the secrets buried in this mountain for 60 years. Lead the way, he says, but the evidence stays with me. Sullivan nods once. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to an emergency exit on the north side. Your uncle showed it to my father once. We need to move now. As they slip out of the archive room, voices echo down the corridor behind them. A commanding voice rises above the others. Secure the facility, find the shadow archive, and if anyone's here, detain them immediately. Marcus follows Sullivan and Harper deeper into Sentinel Ridge, the lockbox tucked under his arm, his uncle's journal in his pocket. The life he knew, the simple existence of a school janitor, falls away with each step, replaced by something more dangerous, more important. For the first time in years, Marcus Reynolds is no longer invisible. The maintenance tunnel smells of rust and stagnant water. Marcus follows Sullivan's bobbing flashlight beam, hunched over to avoid the low ceiling. Behind them, Harper struggles to keep up, wheezing slightly, carrying a canvas bag hastily packed with several of the rhodium cylinders. Where does this lead? Marcus whispers, clutching the lockbox against his chest. The microfilm inside feels impossibly fragile. 60-year-old evidence of a conspiracy that could still burn the world down. Northern Ridge, Sullivan replies without turning. About half a mile from here. Your uncle showed my father this escape route when they worked together. Said it was their insurance policy. The tunnel narrows the concrete walls, giving way to rough-hewn rock. This section was blasted out of the mountain itself, reinforced with timber supports that grown under the weight of decades. They knew this might happen, Marcus realizes. They built an escape route because they expected someone to come after them. Robert Reynolds was nothing if not prepared, Harper says between labored breaths. Your uncle had contingencies for his contingencies. A sound from behind them, distant but unmistakable. Voices echoing through the tunnel. They found the entrance. Sullivan quickens her pace. Move faster. They push forward, feet splashing through shallow puddles. The air grows fresher as they approach a steel ladder leading upward. Sullivan goes first, pushing against a heavy metal cover. It lifts with a protesting screech, revealing a patch of night sky sprinkled with stars. One by one, they emerge into a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. The exit is disguised as an old storm drain covered with moss and fallen leaves. From 100 yards away, no one would notice it. My truck's back at the main gate, Marcus says. We're not going that way. Sullivan points down a narrow trail. I parked off the service road on the north side. Old logging route that doesn't show up on maps anymore. Harper replaces the drain cover, carefully arranging leaves over it. This will slow them down, but not for long. Blackwood's people are thorough. They trek through the dark forest, guided only by Sullivan's flashlight and the occasional glimpse of moonlight through the trees. The temperature has dropped their breath, forming small clouds in the night air. You still haven't told me what Rhodium 103 really is, Marcus says as they walk, or who Alexander Blackwood is, or why any of this matters 60 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Sullivan glances back at him. Let's get to safety first. Then I'll tell you everything I know. Which might not be much, Harper adds. Your uncle kept secrets from everyone, including the Pentagon. 20 minutes later, they reach a black Jeep Cherokee parked on an overgrown logging road. Sullivan unlocks it with a key fob, motioning for them to get in quickly. Put the evidence in here, she says, opening a hidden compartment beneath the rear cargo area. Shielded against tracking signals. Marcus hesitates, still clutching the lockbox. You seem awfully prepared for someone who just happened to be looking for old classified material. A flicker of something. Annoyance, respect, crosses Sullivan's face. I've been looking for this for 10 years, Mr. Reynolds, since my father died and left me his own journals. Now please, we need to move. Marcus places the lockbox in the compartment, but keeps his uncle's journal in his jacket pocket. Sullivan doesn't object. The Jeep growls to life, headlights cutting through the darkness as they begin the careful journey down the abandoned logging road. Harper sits in the back, still wheezing slightly, the canvas bag of rhodium cylinders clutched in his lap. Where are we going? Marcus asks as the Jeep bounces over ruts and exposed roots. Farmhouse about 40 miles from here, Sullivan replies, eyes on the rough road. Off the grid, secure. Your safe house. One of them. They drive in silence for several minutes, eventually reaching a paved secondary road. Sullivan keeps the speed moderate, not slow enough to attract attention, not fast enough to risk being pulled over. Alexander Blackwood, she finally says, is the CEO of Blackwood Defense Technologies, son of Richard Blackwood, who was part of the original Granite Shadow team with your uncle and my father. I saw his name in the photograph. Marcus nods. But what's his interest in this now? Why come after the rhodium after all these years? Harper leans forward from the back seat. Because rhodium 103 isn't just valuable, Mr. Reynolds. It's game-changing. The isotope your uncle helped develop has properties that modern science is only beginning to understand. What kind of properties? Superconductivity at room temperature, Sullivan says. Perfect quantum coherence. The holy grail of materials science. Marcus frowns. I'm a janitor, not a physicist. What does that mean in English? It means Harper explains that whoever controls this material could develop weapon systems, communications technology, and computational power beyond anything currently in existence. Quantum computers that make today's supercomputers look like abacuses. Untraceable communications. Guidance systems that can't be jammed. And weapons, Sullivan adds, her voice hardening. Don't forget the weapons. The original purpose of Granite Shadow. Which was what exactly, Marcus asks. Sullivan glances at him. A first strike capability against Cuba during the missile crisis. A weapon that could bypass Soviet defenses with perfect accuracy. A way to eliminate the Cuban missile sites before they could be activated. Without presidential authorization, Marcus says, remembering his uncle's journal. Exactly. Sullivan grips the steering wheel tighter. General Curtis LeMay and a group of hardliners wanted to solve the Cuban problem permanently. They didn't think Kennedy was willing to do what was necessary. They were planning a coup, the words hang in the air, impossible yet undeniable. Not explicitly, Harper says, more like presenting Kennedy with a fait accompli. Once the strike was launched, he'd have no choice but to follow through with the rest of the war plan. Marcus processes this, and my uncle found out. Sullivan nods. Robert Reynolds discovered the true nature of Granite Shadow on October 27, 1962, the most dangerous day of the crisis. Soviet ships were approaching the blockade line. U.S. forces were at DEFCON 2. The world was one miscalculation away from nuclear war. So what did he do? He stole the rhodium, Harper says. Without it, the weapon system wouldn't work. It required the specific properties of rhodium 103 to function. And my father, where does he fit in? Sullivan takes a sharp turn onto an even smaller road, nearly invisible in the darkness. Lieutenant James Reynolds was the weapons officer. He was responsible for the technical implementation of the Granite Shadow device. But he helped my uncle stop it. Marcus says not a question, but a statement. Yes, Sullivan confirms. According to my father's journals, James Reynolds helped Robert secure the rhodium and the evidence. They were patriots, Mr. Reynolds. They believed in America, but not in what LeMay and his group were planning. The road narrows further, barely more than a dirt track cutting through dense forest. No streetlights, no houses, nothing but wilderness. What happened after they stopped the weapon from being deployed? Marcus asks. The crisis ended peacefully the next day, Harper says. Kennedy and Khrushchev reached an agreement. The Soviets withdrew their missiles from Cuba. We later removed ours from Turkey. The world stepped back from the brink. And no one knew how close we'd come to the edge, Sullivan adds. Not just from the Soviets, but from our own military. They covered it up, Marcus realizes. Of course they did, Harper says. Can you imagine the scandal? American generals conspiring to force the president's hand? It would have torn the country apart at the height of the Cold War. So they buried Granite Shadow, Marcus says, decommissioned the facility, offered my uncle early retirement and ownership of Sentinel Ridge. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, Sullivan says. They wanted to know where he was, what he was doing, and they wanted to know where the rhodium was hidden. But he never told them. No, Adam. There's respect in Sullivan's voice now. Colonel Robert Reynolds kept that secret for 60 years, until he died and left Sentinel Ridge to you. The farmhouse appears suddenly around a bend, a two-story structure with a wide porch, weathered clapboard siding, and a metal roof that gleams dully in the moonlight. No lights visible, no vehicles in the gravel drive. It looks abandoned, but Marcus notices the new locks on the doors, the barely visible security cameras tucked under the eaves. Sullivan parks behind the house, out of sight from the road. We should be safe here for now. Blackwood won't find this place easily. Inside the farmhouse is surprisingly modern despite its rustic exterior. Solar-powered LED lights, satellite communications equipment, and a computer setup that would make any tech enthusiast jealous. The furnishings are sparse but functional. A dining table with 4 chairs, a worn sofa, and shelves lined with books and equipment. Government safe house, Marcus asks, setting the lockbox on the table. Personal, Sullivan corrects. My family has owned this property for generations. Off the books. No connection to me in any official records. Paranoid much? I prefer prepared, she says, echoing Harper's earlier description of Marcus's uncle. In my line of work, it pays to have places like this. And what line of work is that exactly? Marcus asks. Besides breaking into abandoned military facilities in the middle of the night. Sullivan hesitates, then reaches into her pocket and produces an ID card. Department of Defense Special Historical Projects Division. We investigate cold cases involving national security matters. She's underselling it, Harper says, setting his canvas bag on the table next to the lockbox. Elaine leads a team, that tracks down missing weapons, unaccounted for materials, forgotten contingency plans, the skeletons in America's national security closet. And rhodium-103 is one of those skeletons. One of the biggest, Sullivan confirms. The material itself is valuable enough, worth billions on today's market. But the knowledge of what it was intended for, she shakes her head, that's priceless and dangerous. Marcus looks between them. So why are you here? What do you want with it? To secure it, Sullivan says. Make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Like Blackwood's. Exactly like Blackwood's. She moves to a cabinet, pulls out 3 glasses and a bottle of bourbon. Alexander Blackwood has spent the last 15 years building Blackwood Defense Technologies into one of the largest private military contractors in the world. They develop cutting-edge weapons systems, surveillance technology, you name it. All perfectly legal, Harper adds, accepting a glass from Sullivan. All very profitable, but Blackwood wants more. He wants what his father started. Sullivan continues, pouring a measure for Marcus. Richard Blackwood was the scientist who first theorized the unique properties of rhodium-103. He dedicated his life to it. When the project was shut down, it broke him. Alexander grew up hearing about the miracle material that could have changed everything, Harper says. The project the government abandoned, the legacy his father never completed. So this is about revenge, Marcus asks, turning the glass in his hands but not drinking. Partly, Sullivan says, but it's also about power. With rhodium-103, Blackwood could develop weapons and technology generations ahead of anything currently available. He could sell to the highest bidder, foreign governments, terrorist organizations, anyone with deep enough pockets. Or keep it for himself, Harper adds grimly. Imagine a private military contractor with technology that could bypass any defense system in the world. Marcus sets down his glass. And you expect me to just hand it over to you? How do I know your intentions are any better? Sullivan meets his gaze. You don't, but I'm not asking you to hand it over. I'm asking you to help me understand what's in that lockbox, to see what your uncle and father were trying to preserve. Then we can decide what to do next. Marcus considers this, then nods toward the lockbox. Let's see what they left us. The lockbox is military grade, designed to protect its contents from almost any environmental hazard. Inside, carefully packed in foam, are 5 microfilm reels, a miniature reel-to-reel recorder, and a small notebook with a faded leather cover. Harper examines the microfilm reels. These appear to be technical specifications, weapon designs, deployment scenarios, target packages. Sullivan finds a viewer in her equipment and threads the first reel. Images appear on a small screen, schematics, equations, test results. She whistles softly. This is the complete Granite Shadow technical package. The science behind rhodium-103, the weapon system, everything. Marcus picks up the notebook, opening it carefully. His father's name is written on the first page in the same handwriting he remembers from birthday cards and notes left on the refrigerator. The entries are technical at first. Test results, calculations, observations about material properties. Then dated October 26, 1962. Bob showed me the Ascension protocol today. Can't believe what I'm seeing. This isn't defense. This is a straight first strike capability bypassing normal command channels. Curtis is pushing to activate without presidential authorization. Says Kennedy doesn't have the stomach to do what's necessary. This isn't what I signed up for. October 27th. Made decision. Cannot be part of this. Told Bob I'm with him. We're securing the R-103 tonight. We'll hide it where no one can find it. If this goes wrong, Marie needs to know I did it for her and the baby. The baby. Marcus. His father had done this for his mother and their unborn child. A final entry undated. If you're reading this, something has happened to Bob and me. The material is secure. The evidence is here. Trust no one, especially not Blackwood. The key is in the family. Marcus looks up. What does that mean, the key is in the family? Sullivan shakes her head. I don't know. Maybe a code of some kind? The miniature recorder sits on the table still unopened. Marcus picks it up, examining it. A standard government-issue micro-cassette recorder from the early 1960s designed for field agents to document observations. He presses the play button, but nothing happens. Batteries, Harper says. Amiastas. After all these years, they'd be long dead. Sullivan rummages through a drawer and produces a small battery adapter. Try this. It's adjustable for various vintage equipment. Marcus connects it, and the recorder's small reel begins to turn. A voice emerges from the tiny speaker, clear, authoritative, unmistakably military. October 27, 1962, General Curtis LeMay speaking. Ascension Protocol is hereby activated. Sentinel Ridge acknowledge receipt and prepare for targeting package transmission. Another voice responds. Marcus recognizes his uncle's formal tone from childhood visits. Sentinel Ridge acknowledges. Authorization code required, sir. Authorization Lima Echo Mike Alpha Yankee. Override Washington Control. This comes directly from SAK. A pause. Sir, that's not standard protocol. The president doesn't have the spine to do what's necessary, Reynolds. You've seen the intel. Those missiles in Cuba could be operational within 24 hours. We're out of time. With respect, Sir, Granite Shadow deployment requires presidential authorization under. Those requirements have been waived under emergency protocols. Do you understand me, Captain Reynolds? This is a direct order. Another pause longer this time. Understood, sir. Preparing for targeting package transmission. The recording ends. Sullivan and Harper exchange glances. He was buying time, Sullivan says quietly. Your uncle. He knew what they were planning. And my father helped him stop it. Marcus adds, feeling a strange pride in a man he barely remembers. There's more, Harper says, checking the tape. Another recording on the B side. Marcus flips the cassette and presses play again. A new voice, younger with the same inflections Marcus hears in his own speech. His father. This is Lieutenant James Reynolds, weapons officer, Sentinel Ridge facility, recording this as evidence of actions taken on October 27, 1962. Captain Robert Reynolds and I have secured the rhodium-103 material required for Granite Shadow deployment. We are placing it in secure storage, along with this testimony and supporting documentation. A rustling sound papers being moved. We believe General Curtis LeMay and possibly others in Strategic Air Command are attempting to force a first strike against Cuba without presidential authorization. The Ascension Protocol they have activated bypasses normal command and control channels. We cannot in good conscience participate in what amounts to a military coup against civilian leadership. Another voice in the background, his uncle. Add that we're loyal officers acting to protect the Constitution and civilian control of the military. Yes, that's important. His father's voice again. We want to be clear that our actions, while technically in violation of direct orders, are taken in defense of our oath to the Constitution. We believe the Ascension Protocol itself is illegal and represents a grave threat to American democracy. A deep breath. If anything happens to us, this evidence should be delivered to the President of the United States directly, not through military channels. The conspiracy may extend further than we currently know. The recording ends. The room is silent except for the soft whir of the empty tape continuing to spin. Jesus, Harper whispers. They weren't just stopping a weapon, Sullivan says. They were preventing a coup. Marcus stares at the recorder, hearing his father's voice for the first time in over 30 years. The voice of a man who risked everything to do what was right. And they kept this secret all these years, he says, even from their families. They had to, Sullivan replies. The men behind Ascension were powerful, connected. If this had gotten out at the wrong time, My father died when I was 10, Marcus says. Factory accident. At least that's what we were told. Sullivan and Harper exchange another look. What? Marcus demands. What aren't you telling me? Sullivan hesitates, then speaks carefully. According to my father's journals, James Reynolds' death wasn't an accident. He was killed to keep him quiet. They would have gone after your uncle too, but he had taken precautions. Dead man switches evidence in multiple locations. They decided it was safer to watch him than eliminate him. The room spins around Marcus. His father, murdered. The accident at the steel mill that his mother never fully explained that left her a widow raising a young boy alone. Who, he asks, his voice a whisper. Who killed him? We don't know for certain, Sullivan says. My father suspected it was Richard Blackwood. He had the most to lose if the truth about Granite Shadow came out. His reputation, his career, everything. Alexander Blackwood's father. Yes. Marcus stands abruptly, needing to move to process this. He paces the small room, pieces falling into place. So that's why my uncle left me Sentinel Ridge. He knew they were watching him, knew he couldn't expose the truth himself. He was passing the responsibility to me. It appears so, Harper agrees. The question is, what do we do with it now? The people directly involved in the Ascension Protocol are mostly dead. LeMay, your uncle, your father, Richard Blackwood, my father. But Alexander Blackwood is very much alive, Sullivan points out, and he wants the rhodium for his own purposes. Marcus stops pacing. We need to expose it, all of it, the coup attempt, the rhodium, everything. It's not that simple, Harper cautions. This is still classified material. Revealing it without authorization would be a federal crime. My father and uncle committed treason to protect the Constitution, Marcus says. I think I can risk a federal charge. There are proper channels, Sullivan argues, ways to declassify historical material like this. My division could... A sharp crack interrupts her, the distinctive sound of a high-powered rifle shot. The window behind Harper explodes inward, showering him with glass as he dives to the floor. Get down, Sullivan yells, already in motion, pulling Marcus behind the solid kitchen counter as more shots ring out. How did they find us? Marcus shouts over the gunfire. Sullivan is checking her pistol, a compact 9mm that appeared in her hand as if by magic. I don't know. This place isn't in any database. Harper crawls toward them, leaving a smear of blood on the floor. The rhodium, he gasps. It emits a unique radiation signature. If Blackwood has the right equipment, he could track it, Sullivan finishes. Damn it! The front door crashes open. Men in tactical gear pour in, weapons raised. Department of Defense hands where we can see them. Sullivan rises slowly, her pistol pointed downward but not dropped. Special Agent Elaine Sullivan, DOD Historical Projects. Stand down. The lead agent doesn't lower his weapon. We have orders to secure classified material and detain all parties. On whose authority? Sullivan demands. National Security Directive 24/7, signed by the Secretary of Defense this evening. Sullivan's expression hardens. Blackwood. He got to the secretary. Place your weapon on the ground and step back, the agent orders. Sullivan hesitates, calculating odds, possibilities. Don't, Marcus says quietly. There are too many of them. She sets her pistol down carefully. This is a mistake. We're on the same side. That's for others to determine, ma'am. The agent nods to his team. Secure the material and the suspects. As they're being zip-tied, the crowd of agents parts to admit a new figure. A tall man in an expensive suit, silver-haired, with a face that might have been handsome before ambition hardened it into something predatory. He surveys the room with cold calculation, his gaze finally settling on Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, he says, his voice smooth as polished marble. I'm Alexander Blackwood. I believe you have something that belongs to my family. It doesn't belong to anyone, Marcus replies, especially not you. Blackwood smiles without warmth. Such conviction. You remind me of your uncle. He was equally stubborn about things he didn't understand. He moves to the table, examining the lockbox, the microfilm, the recorder. Ah, the famous evidence. I've been looking for this for a very long time. You won't get away with this, Sullivan says. My team knows where I am. Your team has been reassigned. Blackwood cuts her off. National security matter. Very urgent. They're currently searching for nuclear material in Montana. Wild goose chase, I'm afraid, but it will keep them busy for several days. He picks up one of the rhodium cylinders, holding it to the light. Remarkable. After all these years perfectly preserved, my father would have been amazed. Your father was part of a coup attempt, Marcus says. He tried to overthrow civilian control of the military, and when my father helped stop it, your father had him killed. Blackwood's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. History is written by the survivors, Mr. Reynolds. My father saw a Soviet threat 90 miles from American shores. He developed a solution. Weak men stopped him from implementing it, and we spent the next 30 years locked in a Cold War that could have been avoided. You're insane, Sullivan says flatly. I'm practical, Blackwood corrects, just like my father. Just like the men who understood what needed to be done in 1962. He turns to the lead agent. Secure all of this material, follow the containment protocols for the rhodium, and bring these three to the secondary site. What about the farmhouse, sir? Blackwood glances around. Unfortunate gas leak. Terrible tragedy. Make sure nothing survives. As they're led outside, Marcus sees men placing small devices throughout the house. Incendiary charges designed to destroy everything and make it look like an accident. You won't get away with this, Sullivan says again, struggling against the zip ties. I already have, Blackwood replies smoothly. I have the materials, I have the evidence, and soon I'll have you somewhere very quiet where we can discuss exactly what you know and who you've told. They're loaded into separate black SUVs. As Marcus's vehicle pulls away, he looks back at the farmhouse, the last place he heard his father's voice. Soon it will be ash, another piece of history erased. In the distance, thunder rumbles, a spring storm approaching from the west. Or perhaps it's the sound of the past catching up to the present of secrets, too long buried finally breaking free. The SUV turns onto the main road, accelerating into the darkness. Beside Marcus, a guard watches impassively, weapon ready. Ahead, another vehicle carries Sullivan. Behind, a third holds Harper. Marcus tests his restraints. Tight, professional, no give. The training they've given janitors doesn't cover escaping from military-grade zip ties or overpowering armed guards. But as the SUV rounds a curve, something shifts in his pocket. His uncle's journal, forgotten in the chaos, pressing against his ribs. The key is in the family his father had written. Whatever that means, Marcus still has a piece of the puzzle. And as long as he has that, there's hope. The convoy disappears into the night, heading toward a confrontation 60 years in the making. Behind them, the first flames begin to lick at the farmhouse walls. The secondary site turns out to be an underground bunker, buried beneath what appears to be an ordinary office building on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. The 3-hour drive passes in tense silence, the guard beside Marcus never speaking, never taking his eyes off his prisoner. The SUV convoy descends into a subterranean parking garage where men in black tactical gear escort Marcus, Sullivan, and Harper into a freight elevator. No logos, no identifying marks, nothing to indicate which agency, if any, is running this operation. The elevator descends for what feels like minutes. 5 floors, 10, more. When the doors finally open, they reveal a sterile hallway of polished concrete and recessed lighting. The air smells faintly of ozone and industrial cleaner. They're separated, led to different interrogation rooms. Marcus's is small, windowless, with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs facing each other. A camera watches from the corner, its red light a steady, unblinking eye. The guard removes the zip ties, instructs Marcus to sit, and leaves. The door locks with a heavy thunk. Marcus rubs his wrist, looks around. Nothing in the room offers an escape route or a weapon. Just white walls, hard furniture, and the camera. Time passes. An hour, maybe more. No clock to tell. Just the hum of ventilation and the occasional distant sound of a door opening and closing. Finally, the door swings open. Alexander Blackwood enters, carrying a manila folder. He sets it on the table, takes the seat opposite Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, he says as if they're meeting for a business lunch. I hope they've treated you well. Marcus says nothing. I understand your confusion, Blackwood continues. Your uncle was a secretive man. He didn't tell you what you were inheriting or why. Let me fill in some gaps. He opens the folder, slides a document across the table. A declassified report from 1962, Heavily redacted, but with enough visible text to make out the essentials, a Soviet plan to arm their missiles in Cuba with an experimental warhead design that could penetrate American defenses. What the history books don't tell you, Blackwood says, is how close we came to annihilation. The Soviets weren't just placing conventional missiles in Cuba. They were developing a first strike capability that could have reached Washington in less than 15 minutes. He slides another document across. My father discovered this. He developed rhodium-103 as our counter, a material that could shield our own weapons and delivery systems from Soviet detection. The perfect defense, and if necessary, the perfect offense. That's not what the evidence shows, Marcus says, finding his voice. Granite Shadow wasn't about defense. It was about bypassing the president's authority, launching an unauthorized first strike. Blackwood's smile is thin. A matter of perspective, General LeMay and my father saw a window of opportunity closing. Kennedy was hesitating. Every day of delay increased the risk that those Soviet missiles would become operational. So they decided to commit treason. They decided to save their country. Blackwood leans forward. Do you know what would have happened if the Soviets had launched first millions dead in the initial strike? Tens of millions more in the counterstrike. The end of the United States as we know it. Kennedy and Khrushchev found a peaceful solution, Marcus counters, without launching a single missile. They got lucky, and do you know why? Blackwood taps the document. Because the Soviets believed we had superior technology. They thought we could detect and neutralize their missiles. The mere possibility of rhodium-103 was enough to make them back down. He pulls another paper from the folder, a technical schematic showing the molecular structure of the isotope. This material changed history once. Imagine what it could do now with modern technology. In the hands of a private defense contractor. Marcus shakes his head. That's not what my uncle wanted. Your uncle was short-sighted, Blackwood says, an edge entering his voice. He saw a weapon. I see the future. Quantum computing, impenetrable encryption, energy transmission without loss, medical applications beyond anything currently possible. He sits back studying Marcus. Your father and uncle stole that future from us, from everyone. And for what? To uphold some abstract principle about civilian control, to prevent a coup, Marcus says, to stop a group of generals from starting World War III. Blackwood waves this away. Ancient history. What matters now is what we do with the rhodium. And I'm offering you a place in that future, Mr. Reynolds. A place. Blackwood Defense Technologies could use someone with your unique connection to this material. The containment system your uncle built recognizes your DNA. There may be other safeguards we haven't discovered yet. Work with us. Help us understand what we have. Share in the rewards. Marcus stares at him. You think I'd help you after learning you had my father killed? Blackwood's expression doesn't change. I had nothing to do with your father's death. I was a child when it happened. But your father did. My father protected his life's work, Blackwood says coldly, just as I'm protecting mine. He slides a final document across the table, a non-disclosure agreement with Blackwood Defense Technologies letterhead. Sign this, agree to work with us, or face federal charges for theft of classified material, espionage, and obstruction of justice. And if I refuse, then you'll disappear into a hole so deep even I won't be able to find you. Blackwood stands. Think about it. I'll be back in an hour. He leaves the door locking behind him. Marcus picks up the NDA, skims the dense legal language. Lifetime secrecy, complete surrender of all rights to the rhodium and associated technology, a consulting position with Blackwood Defense that amounts to house arrest at a company facility. He sets the paper down, looks up at the camera. Somewhere someone is watching. Maybe Sullivan and Harper are in rooms just like this one facing the same choice. His hand goes to his pocket, feeling the outline of his uncle's journal. The key is in the family. What had his father meant? Marcus pulls out the journal, flips through the pages he's already read. Nothing that seems like a key or a code. He examines the binding, the cover, looking for hidden compartments or messages. Then he notices something. The inside back cover is slightly thicker than it should be. He runs his fingers along the edge, feels a seam. Carefully, he works a fingernail into it, peeling back the leather to reveal a hidden pocket. Inside is a small metal key, old-fashioned, similar to the one that opens Sentinel Ridge's gate. Attached to it is a tag with a sequence of numbers, 38.8977 dig, is 77.365 dig W, coordinates. But to what and how would this help him, Mal locked in an underground bunker with armed guards outside? The door opens again. Not Blackwood this time, but a technician in a lab coat. He carries a small device that looks like a medical scanner. "Mr. Reynolds," he says, professional but not friendly, "I need to take a blood sample." "Why, how? To analyze your DNA markers. The containment system at Sentinel Ridge recognized you. We need to understand how." Marcus hesitates, stalls. "Where are Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Harper?" "Being processed," the technician says vaguely. "Your arm, please." Marcus slowly extends his arm. As the technician leans in with the device, Marcus notices something on his ID badge, partially obscured by his lab coat but visible for a moment as he moves. A logo. Not Blackwood Defense Technologies, but a stylized eagle clutching arrows in an olive branch. The Department of Defense. The technician catches Marcus looking, meets his eyes briefly. A tiny nod, almost imperceptible. "This won't hurt," he says, pressing the device against Marcus's forearm. It beeps, drawing a small sample of blood. "I'll need to run this through our system. Someone will be back for you shortly." He leaves, but not before dropping something from his sleeve. A small slip of paper that falls to the floor beside Marcus's chair. Marcus waits until the door closes, then reaches down. The note is handwritten, the letters tiny and precise. "Sullivan team en route, 20 minutes. Be ready." Hope surges in Marcus's chest. Sullivan's people found them. But how and what does "be ready" mean? He looks at the key again, at the coordinates. Something about them seems familiar. He's seen them before somewhere. Then it hits him. Not the exact numbers, but the location they represent. Downtown Washington, D.C., near the National Mall. But what's there that would matter to his father and uncle, the White House? No, that's not right. The Pentagon, possible, but unlikely. The Smithsonian, the Washington Monument, none of them feel right. What else is in that area that would matter to military men concerned with constitutional authority and civilian control? The National Archives, where the Constitution is kept, where the evidence of Granite Shadow and Ascension would have the most impact, preserved for history, impossible to suppress or destroy. The key is in the family, not his biological family, but the American family, the founding documents that his father and uncle risked everything to protect. A distant boom shakes dust from the ceiling. Then another. Alarms begin to wail. Marcus pockets the key and the journal. Whatever's happening, he needs to be ready to move. The door flies open. The technician is back, but now he's armed, wearing tactical gear over his lab coat. "Reynolds with me. Now." "Who are you?" "Colonel Frank Matthews, Special Activities Division." "I work with Sullivan." He tosses Marcus a vest. "Put this on. We're Oscar Mike in 30 seconds. Marcus dons the vest, follows Matthews into the corridor. It's chaos. Emergency lights, flashing sprinklers, activated, armed personnel running in all directions. "What's happening?" "Extraction," Matthews says, checking corners before advancing. "Sullivan's team created a diversion 2 levels up. We're getting you here and Harper out before Blackwood realizes what's happening." They round a corner, find Sullivan and 2 operators escorting a limping Harper. His leg is bandaged, face pale. "Marcus," Sullivan says, relief in her voice. "Thank God. Frank, did you tell him?" "No time," Matthews replies. "We need to move. Elevator shaft is compromised." Taking the emergency stairs. They hurry down the corridor, Matthews in the lead, another operator bringing up the rear. The sounds of gunfire echo from somewhere above. "What's happening?" Marcus asks Sullivan as they run. "My team tracked us through an emergency beacon in my watch," she explains. "When they realized we'd been taken by a domestic group operating outside official channels, they initiated a recovery operation." "You mean a raid?" "Technically, this facility doesn't exist," Sullivan says. "So technically, this isn't a raid." They reach a heavy metal door marked "Emergency Exit." Matthews swipes a key card, pushes it open to reveal a concrete stairwell. 16 floors up, he says. "Pace yourselves." As they climb, Sullivan continues. "Blackwood has connections in the Pentagon, but he overplayed his hand. The Secretary of Defense never signed any directive authorizing this operation. When my team presented evidence that he was holding federal agents against their will, they sent in the cavalry. Harper finishes grimacing with each step. Shouldn't we be going down? Marcus asks. Not up, tunnel network, Matthews explains from the front. This facility connects to 3 other buildings. We're heading for the northeast exit, farthest from where Blackwood will expect us to go. Floor after floor they climb. Marcus's legs burn at his lungs, protest. But with each step they're closer to freedom, closer to exposing the truth. They reach a landing marked B2. Almost there. The door above them bursts open. Men in black tactical gear pour in, weapons raised. Down, Matthews shouts, shoving Marcus against the wall as gunfire erupts. The stairwell becomes a battlefield of muzzle flashes illuminating concrete in strobe-like bursts. Matthews and his team return fire covering Sullivan as she pulls Harper and Marcus back down the stairs. Plan B, she yells to Matthews over the din. Southwest corridor. Matthews nods, tossing a smoke grenade up the stairwell. Under its cover, they retreat, doubling back through a maintenance door on B4. This level is different, older with pipes running along the ceiling and grated metal flooring. They move quickly through the industrial space, Matthews navigating with the confidence of someone who's studied the blueprints. Utility tunnel, he explains. Cold War era. Connects to the metro maintenance system. Behind them, boots on metal. Blackwood's men in pursuit. Go, Matthews orders, turning to face the threat. I'll hold them here. Sullivan hesitates. That's an order, Agent, Matthews says firmly. Get them out. Get the evidence out. Sullivan nods once, then leads Marcus and Harper forward. The sounds of gunfire erupt behind them as Matthews engages the pursuers. The tunnel seems endless, twisting and branching. Sullivan navigates without hesitation, checking her watch occasionally for what must be directions. Finally, they reach a vertical shaft with metal rungs embedded in the wall, above a circular hatch. Service entrance to the metro tunnels, Sullivan says. Harper, can you climb? Harper nods grimly. Just get me to the top. One by one they ascend. Sullivan goes first, then helps Harper through the hatch. Marcus follows the journal and keys secure in his pocket. The metro tunnel is dark, lit only by emergency lights spaced along the walls. The third rail hums with electricity. This way, Sullivan says, leading them along the maintenance walkway. There's an emergency exit half a mile ahead. They move as quickly as Harper's injury allows the distant sounds of pursuit fading behind them. The tunnel air is stale, heavy with the scent of ozone and dust. Did you know, Marcus asks Sullivan as they walk, about my father? She glances at him. Not until recently. My father left journals too, not as detailed as your uncle's, but enough to piece together what happened. When I learned that Colonel Reynolds had died and left Sentinel Ridge to his nephew, I knew we had to move before Blackwood did. But we were too late, Harper says from behind them. Not too late, Marcus corrects. We got the evidence out. We know the truth. He tells them about the key that coordinates his theory about the National Archives. Your father was cleverer than anyone gave him credit for, Sullivan says admiringly. The archives would be the perfect place to hide a backup. Somewhere even Blackwood couldn't reach it. But will anyone believe us? Harper asks. After all these years, the recordings and microfilm will help, Sullivan says. And I have contacts at the Washington Post and New York Times. Once this story breaks, Blackwood won't be able to suppress it. What about the rhodium? Marcus asks. Blackwood has it now. Not all of it, Sullivan pats her pocket. I secured a sample before they raided the farmhouse. Enough for analysis, enough to prove what it is. They reach the emergency exit, a metal door leading to a service stairwell. Sullivan punches a code into the keypad and the lock disengages. We'll surface 6 blocks from the archives, she says. I have a team meeting us there. As they climb the stairs toward the street, toward the light, Marcus feels a weight lifting. For decades, his father and uncle carried the burden of a terrible secret, protecting the nation from threats both foreign and domestic. Now it's his turn to finish what they started. The key is in the family, and soon the truth will be too. The service door opens to a narrow alley behind a row of government office buildings. The pre-dawn air has cooled the streets of Washington, D.C. unusually quiet. Marcus Sullivan and the injured Harper emerge from the darkness like ghosts from another era, blinking in the ambient light of the capital city. Sullivan checks her watch. 0427 hours. Archives doesn't open until 10:00. We can't wait that long, Harper says, leaning against a brick wall, his makeshift bandage now soaked through. Blackwood's people will regroup, call in reinforcements. I know someone, Sullivan says, already typing on her phone. Security chief at the archives. Vietnam vet, old school, believes in chain of command, but also knows when the system fails. Marcus paces the alley, the key from his uncle's journal, heavy in his pocket. So close now. After 60 years, the truth about Granite Shadow and the Ascension Protocol is hours away from being secured where it belongs. In the nation's historical record, impossible to erase. Sullivan's phone buzzes. She reads the message, nods. 15 minutes. Southeast entrance. My contact will meet us. They move cautiously through the empty streets, keeping to shadows, avoiding the ever-present security cameras of modern Washington. Harper's limp grows more pronounced with each block. Marcus offers his shoulder for support, taking the older man's weight. Sorry about this, Harper wheezes. Not as young as I used to be. You're doing fine, Marcus assures him. Better than I would in your place. The National Archives building looms ahead, neoclassical, imposing, with its row of Corinthian columns and the words Archives and of the United States carved in stone. The repository of America's founding documents, the physical home of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And if Marcus's theory is correct, the hiding place of his father's final insurance policy. A figure emerges from a side entrance, elderly but straight-backed, military bearing, evident even in civilian clothes. This must be Sullivan's contact. Agent Sullivan, the man says quietly as they approach. His weathered face shows no reaction to their disheveled appearance or Harper's obvious injury. Been a while. Chief Williams, Sullivan replies. Thank you for this. You said it was about the Constitution. His eyes shift to Marcus and Harper. These men with you. Dr. Harper, historical analyst. Sullivan indicates. And this is Marcus Reynolds. His father and uncle served during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Williams's eyes narrow slightly at the name Reynolds. Any relation to Colonel Robert Reynolds, Strategic Air Command? My uncle, Marcus confirms. A flash of recognition crosses Williams's face. I served under him briefly. Good man. Principled. He studies Marcus more carefully. You look like your father. Marcus's breath catches. You knew my father too. Lieutenant James Reynolds, weapons specialist, quick mind, spoke his mind sometimes to his detriment. Williams looks at his watch. We should move inside. Security sweep in 20 minutes. He leads them through the employee entrance using his key card and a numeric code. The interior is dimly lit by emergency lighting, the grand rotunda ahead of them visible only in outline. Where to? Williams asks. Marcus pulls out the key and the coordinates. My father left these. 38.89 degrees and 77.0365 degrees W. Williams takes the paper, studies it. That's inside the building all right, but not the main exhibition area. He thinks for a moment. Research rooms, second floor. They follow him through the silent building, footsteps echoing on marble floors. Harper's labored breathing is the only other sound. At a bank of elevators, Williams uses his key card again, then leads them to the second floor. The research area is extensive. Rows of tables, computer terminals, and microfilm readers, all dark and silent now. Williams navigates confidently, counting rows, checking landmarks. Should be right about here, he says, stopping at a section of the wall that looks no different from any other. But his trained eye catches something. A small metal plate at baseboard level, nearly invisible unless you're looking for it. Marcus kneels, examines the plate. There's a keyhole, old-fashioned, like the key in his pocket. He inserts it, turns. A soft click, and a panel in the wall slides open just enough to reveal a small safe deposit box. Williams gives a low whistle. Cold War-era dead drop. I haven't seen one of these in decades. Your father had high-level access. More likely he had friends in low places, Sullivan comments. Maintenance staff, security personnel. The invisible workforce that keeps places like this running. Like father, like son, Harper adds with a meaningful glance at Marcus's janitor uniform. Marcus removes the box, sets it on a nearby table. It's locked, but the same key works here too. Inside is a sealed metal canister, the kind used for preserving documents long-term. Sullivan produces a pair of archival gloves from her pocket. Clearly she came prepared. Marcus puts them on, carefully opens the canister. Inside is a stack of microfilm reels, photographs, and a sealed letter addressed simply to the President of the United States. The backup, Harper whispers. Your father and uncle created redundancies. Multiple insurance policies. Sullivan agrees, examining the microfilm reels. These match what we found at Sentinel Ridge. Williams leans in. What exactly did your father and uncle do, son? Marcus meets his gaze. They stopped a coup, October 27, 1962. General Curtis LeMay and a group of hardliners tried to force a first strike against Cuba without presidential authorization. My father and uncle sabotaged their plans. Williams's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes shifts. Recognition, perhaps, or the confirmation of an old suspicion. There were rumors, he says quietly, among those of us who served in SAC during that period. Whispers about an operation that went dark suddenly, codenamed Granite Shadow. You knew about it? Sullivan asked sharply. Williams shakes his head. Not details, just that something big was being developed, then suddenly it was gone. All records purged, personnel reassigned. The kind of cleanup that only happens when something goes very wrong or very right. He looks at the canister with new respect. LeMay was a hard man, brilliant strategist, but saw everything in black and white. During the missile crisis, he pushed Kennedy hard for airstrikes and invasion of Cuba. When Kennedy hesitated, LeMay decided to force his hand, Sullivan finishes. It fits his profile, Williams acknowledges. He believed absolutely in American military superiority and the necessity of confronting the Soviet threat directly. Marcus unseals the letter, unfolds the brittle paper carefully. The handwriting matches his father's journal, precise, methodical. To the President of the United States, he reads aloud. If you are reading this, then the Ascension Protocol and Project Granite Shadow have finally come to light. What follows is a full accounting of events that took place between October 24-27, 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The letter continues, detailing the development of Rhodium-103, the creation of a first strike weapons system designed to bypass normal command channels, and the plan by General LeMay and several other high-ranking officers to activate it without Kennedy's knowledge or approval. We acted to preserve civilian control of the military and uphold our oath to the Constitution. The letter concludes, we committed technical treason to prevent a greater treason. If there is to be judgment, let history be our judge. It's signed by both James and Robert Reynolds. The room is silent when Marcus finishes reading. Even Williams seems shaken. All these years, Harper murmurs, they kept this secret for all these years. They had to, Sullivan says. Exposing it during the Cold War could have torn the country apart, weakened us at a critical time. But they made sure the truth would come out eventually, Marcus adds, looking at the cache of evidence. They just needed the right moment. Williams checks his watch. Security sweep in 2 minutes. We need to move. Where? Marcus asks. We can't just walk out of here with this material. I have a secure room, Williams says, used for processing classified historical documents before declassification. We can hold there until the archives director arrives. This needs to go through proper channels now. They repack the evidence, close the wall panel, and follow Williams through a maze of corridors to a windowless room with a heavy steel door. Inside are work tables, computers, and document preservation equipment. Williams locks them in, then makes a call. Brief, cryptic, but clearly to the archives director. He'll be here in 30 minutes, Williams reports. I told him it involves national security and constitutional issues. That got his attention. Harper sinks gratefully into a chair, his face pale. Sullivan examines his wound, applies a fresh bandage from a first aid kit on the wall. What happens now? Marcus asks, setting the evidence box on a table. Due process, Sullivan says. The archives director will authenticate the materials. My team will verify your father's and uncle's identities and roles. Once the provenance is established, the documents will be properly preserved and eventually declassified. In Blackwood, Sullivan's expression darkens. My team will handle Blackwood. What he did, kidnapping federal agents, operating an unauthorized detention facility, those are serious crimes. Even with his connections, he can't escape that. What about the rhodium? Harper asks. He still has most of it. Not for long, Sullivan assures him. Based on what we found at the farmhouse, we have enough evidence to secure a warrant for Blackwood Defense Technologies. Every ounce of that material will be recovered. Marcus isn't convinced. Blackwood's powerful, connected. He'll fight back. Let him, Sullivan says grimly. Some fights are worth having. Williams returns from checking the corridor. Director's on his way. Building security has been alerted to watch for any unusual activity. He looks at Marcus. Your father and uncle were brave men. What they did, it couldn't have been easy. No, Marcus agrees. It wasn't. He thinks of his father's journal, the difficult choice he made knowing it might cost him everything. And ultimately it did. A soft knock on the door. Williams checks the peephole, then unlocks it. A distinguished older man enters. Gray-haired, wearing a hastily donned suit, his tie slightly askew. The archives director. His eyes sweep the room, taking in the injured Harper, the disheveled Sullivan and Marcus, still in his janitor's uniform, now torn and dirty from their escape. Chief Williams, he says, this had better be as important as you suggested. Williams gestures to the evidence box. Sir, these people have uncovered documents related to a critical national security incident during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Material that's been hidden here in our building for over 60 years. The director's eyebrows rise. He approaches the table, examines the canister, the microfilm, the letter. Where did this come from? Sullivan steps forward, shows her credentials. Dr. Elaine Sullivan, Department of Defense Historical Projects Division. This material was preserved by 2 military officers who prevented an unauthorized nuclear strike during the missile crisis. Unauthorized? The director's attention sharpens. By whom? General Curtis LeMay and several other Air Force commanders, Sullivan explains. They developed a weapon system designed to bypass presidential authority. These men stopped it. The director picks up James Reynolds' letter, reads it silently. His expression grows increasingly grave. This is extraordinary, he says finally. If authenticated, this would significantly alter our understanding of that period. He looks at Marcus. And you are Marcus Reynolds. James Reynolds was my father. Robert Reynolds was my uncle. A janitor from Pennsylvania, Williams adds, who inherited more than he bargained for. The director considers this, then nods decisively. We'll need to assemble a special team. Historians, archivists, national security experts. This material must be handled with the utmost care. He turns to Sullivan. Your department will need to be involved, of course. Already on it, sir, Sullivan confirms. My team is securing related evidence from other locations as we speak. A commotion outside, raised voices, footsteps. Williams moves to the door, hand going to where a weapon would be if he were still in uniform. The door bursts open. Men in suits enter, flanking a stern-faced woman in her 50s who carries herself with unmistakable authority. Director Hayes, she addresses the archivist director. I'm Ellen Farrell, Deputy Director of National Intelligence. This facility is now under the jurisdiction of the Office of the DNI. Sullivan steps forward. On what authority? Farrell produces a document. Executive order signed 30 minutes ago. National security concerns related to classified Cold War materials. Her gaze sweeps the room, settles on the evidence box. Is that it? The archives director stands his ground. Deputy Director, this material was deposited legally in the National Archives. It falls under our preservation mandate. That material contains information that could damage national security and bilateral relations with current allies. Farrell counters. It requires special handling. Marcus watches the exchange with growing alarm. This is exactly what his father and uncle feared. The system closing ranks, protecting itself, burying the truth. Sullivan's phone buzzes. She checks it, her face paling slightly. What is it? Marcus asks quietly. Blackwood, she murmurs. He's activated his connections. This goes higher than I thought. One of Farrell's aides whispers something in her ear. She nods, then addresses the room. We've received information that foreign intelligence agencies may be targeting this material. The security of the archives is potentially compromised. That's convenient, Sullivan says, not bothering to hide her skepticism. Just as we uncover evidence of a historical attempted coup, suddenly there's a security threat. I don't make the threats, Dr. Sullivan. I respond to them, Farrell replies coolly. And right now, protocol dictates securing this material at our facility. The realization hits Marcus like a physical blow. After everything, the escape, the evidence, the vindication so close at hand, they might still lose. The truth might still be buried. Unless the key is in the family. His father's words echo in his mind, not just about the physical key that opened the wall safe, but something deeper, the American family, the shared heritage that binds all citizens. Marcus steps forward, addressing Farrell directly. Deputy Director, with respect, this evidence doesn't just belong to the government. It belongs to history, to the American people. Farrell's expression is unmoved. Mr. Reynolds, I understand you feel a personal connection to this material, but national security considerations take precedence. Not when the national security consideration is covering up an attempted coup against a sitting president. Marcus says, his voice stronger now. Not when it's hiding the fact that military commanders tried to usurp civilian authority and launch an unauthorized nuclear strike. The room goes still. Even Farrell's impassive facade cracks slightly. That's a serious accusation, she says carefully. It's all documented right there. Marcus points to the evidence. My father and uncle risked everything, their careers, their freedom, and eventually my father's life, to stop it. They preserved the evidence here in the archives because they believed that someday the truth should be known, that the American people deserve to know how close we came to disaster and who saved us from it. Sullivan steps up beside him. Deputy Director, my team has already secured additional evidence from Sentinel Ridge facility. Recordings of General LeMay ordering the Ascension Protocol activated without presidential authorization. Technical documents on Project Granite Shadow. This isn't going away. One of Farrell's aides whispers something in her ear. Her expression tightens. The Washington Post received an anonymous package 20 minutes ago. Sullivan continues. Contents unknown, but I suspect it contains copies of what we found. A bluff perhaps, but a good one. Marcus watches Farrell calculate her options, weighing damage control against total suppression. The political reality is shifting before their eyes. Too many people know now too many copies of the evidence exist. These materials would require extensive review before any public disclosure. Farrell says finally, decades-old events taken out of context could be dangerously misinterpreted. Then provide the context, Marcus counters. Declassify the surrounding materials. Let historians do their work, but don't bury this again. The archives director clears his throat. I would remind everyone that under the Presidential Records Act and the Federal Records Act, these materials fall squarely within the archive's mandate to preserve and eventually make accessible. Farrell's phone rings. She steps aside to answer. It speaks in low tones for several minutes. When she returns, her demeanor has subtly shifted. The Director of National Intelligence has conferred with the White House. She announces, in light of the historical significance of these materials, a joint review board will be established. Representatives from the archives, the Pentagon Historical Division, and the intelligence community will evaluate the documents for declassification under an accelerated timeline. Not a complete victory, but not a defeat either. A compromise that acknowledges the truth can't be simply disappeared. And Alexander Blackwood, Sullivan asks, is cooperating with federal authorities, Farrell says, with just the slightest emphasis on cooperating that suggests Blackwood's cooperation might not be entirely voluntary. The tension in the room eases slightly. Williams gives Marcus an approving nod. Harper manages a pained smile. The archives director takes charge, then directing his staff to properly secure and document the evidence. Farrell's team establishes a perimeter, their focus shifting from suppression to protection. Sullivan pulls Marcus aside as the professionals take over. Well done, she says quietly. Your father and uncle would be proud. I didn't do anything, Marcus demurs. I just inherited their mess. You carried their torch, Sullivan corrects. When it mattered most, you stood up for the truth. That's not nothing. Medical personnel arrive to properly treat Harper's wound. As they work, he beckons Marcus over. I've been thinking about the rhodium, he says. The science behind it was decades ahead of its time. Your uncle must have recognized that even as he was hiding it from the world. What do you mean? I mean, Harper winces as the medic cleans his wound, that materials with those properties could revolutionize everything from computing to medicine. Used properly under civilian oversight, it could change the world for the better. Marcus considers this. My uncle kept it hidden for a reason. Because it was developed as a weapon in the wrong hands at the wrong time. Harper agrees. But times change. Purposes change. You think we should develop it now? After all this, Harper meets his gaze. I think that's a decision for people who understand both the science and the ethics involved. People who can ensure it's used to build rather than destroy. He nods towards Sullivan, who's conferring with archive security. People like her. And maybe people like you. I'm just a janitor, Marcus reminds him. Harper smiles. So was your uncle in a way. He spent decades cleaning up other people's messes, keeping things running behind the scenes, unappreciated but essential. The medic helps him onto a stretcher. Think about it. As they wheel Harper out, Sullivan returns to Marcus's side. Transportation's arranged. We'll get you to a secure location until this settles down. Marcus looks around the room, at the evidence being carefully cataloged, at the federal agents and archivists working side by side at the machinery of government, slowly grinding toward the truth rather than away from it. What happens next, he asks. Debriefings, statements, paperwork, endless paperwork, Sullivan says with a wry smile. The wheels of government turn slowly, but they do turn. And Sentinel Ridge, the property. Still yours, technically, though given what was found there, expect some complicated legal discussions about mineral rights and national security implications. Marcus nods. He'd expected as much. The inheritance that had seemed like a joke to his neighbors in Pinecrest was never really about the land or the buildings. It was about the responsibility, the torch being passed. I found something else, he says, pulling his uncle's journal from his pocket. My uncle kept detailed records of everything, and not just Granite Shadow, but other projects, other secrets. Sullivan eyes the journal with professional interest. That would be valuable to our historical archives. I'll hand it over, Marcus agrees. But first I want to read it all. Understand exactly what my father and uncle were involved in. What they sacrificed for. Fair enough, Sullivan concedes. When you're ready. Dawn light begins to filter through the high windows of the archives building, painting the marble floors in gold and amber. A new day. The first day after a 60-year-old secret has finally begun its journey into the light. Sir, an archivist approaches Marcus. We found this with the other materials. He hands over a small envelope yellowed with age, addressed simply to my son. Marcus stares at it, his father's handwriting. A message across time, preserved for decades, waiting for this moment. With trembling fingers, he opens it. Marcus, the letter begins. If you're reading this, then you found what we hid. I hope you never have to, that the world never needs to know how close we came to disaster. But if that day has come, then you need to understand why we did what we did. The letter continues personal now, rather than historical. A father's words to a son he knew he might not live to see grow up. We're taught that heroism means charging into battle, facing the enemy head-on. Sometimes it is, but sometimes heroism is quieter. It's standing up when everyone else sits down. It's speaking truth when lies are easier. It's doing the right thing when no one is watching. Marcus reads on, tears blurring his vision. Whatever happens to me, know this. I acted to protect you, your mother, and the country we love. Not from foreign enemies, but from the enemy within. The temptation to abandon our principles in the name of security. The Constitution doesn't defend itself. That's our job, all of us, every generation. The final paragraph catches in Marcus's throat as he reads it aloud. The key was always in the family, not just our bloodline, but the American family. The shared commitment to liberty and justice that makes us who we are. Guard it well, my son. Some duties are never forgotten. Sullivan stands respectfully silent as Marcus folds the letter, tucks it carefully into his pocket. When he looks up, his eyes are clear, his purpose set. I need to go back to Pinecrest, he says. There's a school that needs its janitor. Sullivan looks surprised. After all this? You could write your own ticket now. Books, interviews, consulting positions. Marcus shakes his head. That's not me. Not yet, anyway. He gestures at the evidence being processed around them. This story isn't about me. It's about them. What they did, what they sacrificed. I just delivered the message. Understanding dawns in Sullivan's eyes. Like your uncle. Working behind the scenes, keeping things running. Exactly. Marcus feels the weight of his father's letter against his heart. Though I wouldn't mind consulting on the rhodium research, making sure it's used the right way this time. I think that can be arranged, Sullivan says. The Special Historical Projects Division could use someone with your unique perspective. Half-time, Marcus stipulates. I've got floors to mop. Sullivan smiles. Deal. Dim. 1 month later, Marcus stands before the imposing gates of Blackwood Defense Technologies headquarters. A far cry from the rusted fence of Sentinel Ridge, these gleaming barriers of steel and reinforced glass broadcast power and impenetrability. But today they open for him. Inside the lobby, all sleek modernity and corporate sterility, a security officer checks his ID, then escorts him to an elevator that requires biometric verification to operate. They descend not up to executive floors, but down into the research levels. The doors open onto a long corridor lined with laboratories. Through glass walls, Marcus glimpses scientists in white coats working with equipment he can't begin to identify. At the end of the hall stands Sullivan, clipboard in hand, speaking with a lab-coated technician. She looks up as Marcus approaches her, professional demeanor softening slightly. Right on time? Janitors learn punctuality, he replies. What's the situation? Federal seizure is complete. We've recovered approximately 87% of the original rhodium supply from Blackwood's facilities. She leads him past security checkpoints into a central lab area. The rest is unaccounted for, but we're working on it. The laboratory is state-of-the-art, a stark contrast to the Cold War-era facility at Sentinel Ridge. In the center, behind multiple layers of security glass, sits a familiar sight, the metal container from the Shadow Archive. Its front panel now opens several of the rhodium cylinders removed for study. Blackwood, Marcus asks. Under house arrest, pending trial, Sullivan says. His legal team is working overtime, but the charges are solid. Kidnapping federal agents, illegal detention, theft of government property, obstruction of justice. He'll cut a deal. Probably, Sullivan acknowledges, but not without significant concessions. His company is being restructured under government oversight. All military contracts suspended pending review. A scientist approaches, clipboard in hand. She's young, eager, with the intense focus of someone at the cutting edge of her field. Dr. Sullivan, Mr. Reynolds, she greets them. We've completed the preliminary analysis of rhodium-103's quantum coherence properties. It's remarkable. Decades ahead of anything we've seen. Weapons applications, Sullivan asked directly. The scientist hesitates. Theoretically, yes. The original granite shadow designs were sound, if crude by today's standards. But the civilian applications are far more significant. Medical imaging, quantum computing, energy transmission. Focus on those, Marcus says. The peaceful applications only. That's our mandate, the scientist confirms. The oversight committee is clear on that point. Good. Sullivan leads Marcus to a secure conference room overlooking the laboratory. Through the window, they watch scientists carefully handling the rhodium samples, scanning them with advanced equipment, recording data. The Joint Review Board meets next week, Sullivan says, taking a seat. The preliminary declassification of your father's and uncle's evidence is proceeding. Heavily redacted, of course, but the essential truth will be preserved. When will it be public? 6 months for the initial release, longer for the technical details. Sullivan slides a folder across the table. They've prepared a statement for you for when the story breaks. Marcus doesn't touch it. I already told you, I don't want to be part of the story. You are part of it whether you want it to be or not, Sullivan says gently. Your father and uncle's actions saved countless lives and preserved civilian control of the military. That legacy deserves recognition. They didn't do it for recognition, Marcus counters. No, they did it because it was right. Sullivan's expression softens. But sometimes the truth needs a face, a human connection that people can understand. Marcus finally takes the folder, tucks it under his arm without opening it. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Sullivan checks her watch. Your flight back to Pennsylvania leaves in 3 hours. Cars waiting downstairs. As they walk back toward the elevator, Marcus pauses to look once more at the laboratory that the scientist was studying the material his uncle protected for so long. It's in good hands now, Sullivan assures him. I hope so, Marcus says, because the key isn't just the rhodium or the evidence or even the truth about what happened. It's the understanding that power needs oversight, that some principles matter more than expediency. The Constitution doesn't defend itself, Sullivan quotes from his father's letter. Exactly. Marcus watches as a scientist carefully measures a sample of rhodium-103, the material catching the light like liquid silver. That's our job. 2 months later, Marcus pushes his mop bucket down the main corridor of Eagle Point High School. The routine is familiar, comforting even. But now it exists alongside his other work. The twice-weekly secure video calls with Sullivan's team, the careful analysis of his uncle's journal, the oversight role in the Rhodium-103 research project, now officially designated Daybreak. Principal Garfield passes him in the hall, nodding with newfound respect. "Morning, Reynolds." "Morning, sir," Marcus replies, continuing his work. The story broke 2 weeks ago, front page of every major newspaper, lead on every network. Cuban Missile Crisis, the secret coup attempt. His father and uncle's names mentioned prominently, their actions detailed, their courage celebrated. For a week, reporters camped outside Marcus's apartment building. For another week, they staked out the school. But eventually, as always happens, the news cycle moved on. The historians and academics took over, analyzing and contextualizing. The government established a special commission to review all remaining classified documents from the period. And Marcus returned to his mop and bucket, to the everyday rhythms of keeping a school running smoothly. The students treat him differently now. No more old mop bucket behind his back. Instead, curious glances, respectful nods. One of the history teachers asked him to speak to her class about his father and uncle. He declined. Not ready for that yet, may never be. His phone buzzes in his pocket, a text from Sullivan. "Daybreak progress report ready for review. Available at 1600. He types back one-handed, still pushing his bucket. "We'll check after shift." In the school trophy case alongside the football championships and academic awards, a new addition catches the morning light. A framed newspaper clipping about Lieutenant James Reynolds and Captain Robert Reynolds and their crucial role during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Beside it, a small brass plaque, donated in honor of Marcus Reynolds, whose family reminds us that heroism takes many forms. Marcus pauses, studying his reflection in the glass. The same gray at the temples, the same lines around his eyes, but something new there too. Purpose, understanding, a connection to something larger than himself. The school bell rings, signaling the start of another day. Students flood the hallways, navigating around the wet floor signs Marcus has set up. Life continues. The world turns. 6 months later, Marcus sits in a quiet corner of the National Archives Museum. Around him, tourists and schoolgirls move through the exhibits, many pausing at the newest edition, a special installation titled "Crisis and Constitution Civilian Control During the Cold War." Behind glass, carefully preserved and displayed, is a replica of his father's letter to the president, along with photographs of James and Robert Reynolds in uniform. The accompanying text explains their actions in measured terms, careful to provide historical context while acknowledging the extraordinary nature of their choice. What the display doesn't show, can't show, is the human cost. The weight his father carried until his death. The decades his uncle spent guarding a secret that could have destroyed or saved a nation, depending on how it was used. A young man in an archives uniform approaches, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. He nods respectfully to Marcus before beginning to polish the glass of a nearby display case. The movement is familiar. Efficient, thorough, invisible to most visitors. Essential work. Unsung work. The kind that keeps civilization running. Marcus watches him for a moment, then turns back to his father's letter. The original is now preserved in climate-controlled storage, but this facsimile captures the urgency of the handwriting, the gravity of the message. His phone vibrates, Sullivan checking in as she does each week. The Daybreak project is progressing, yielding new discoveries about Rhodium-103's properties. Medical applications look especially promising, targeted drug delivery systems that could revolutionize cancer treatment. From weapon to healing tool, his uncle would approve. Marcus responds with his usual brevity, then pockets the phone. A school group approaches the exhibit, their teacher explaining the Cuban Missile Crisis in simplified terms. The students look bored, fidgeting, missing the significance of what stands before them. But that's okay. The truth is preserved now, secured for future generations who might understand better, who might need the lesson more urgently. The machinery of democracy grinds slowly, but it grinds fine. Marcus stands, nods to the security guard at the entrance, another invisible guardian, and steps out into the Washington sunshine. In an hour, he'll be on a plane back to Pennsylvania, back to his mop and bucket, back to the quiet dignity of ordinary work. A tour bus passes, the guide's voice carrying on the breeze. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, America came closer to nuclear war than at any other time in history. Closer than you know, Marcus thinks, and further away thanks to two men who chose Constitution over orders. He walks on anonymous in the crowd carrying his father's letter close to his heart. Some inheritances are more than land or buildings. Some legacies continue generation after generation in the daily choice to do what's right even when no one is watching. Especially then. In a climate-controlled vault beneath his feet, beside the founding documents that define America, the evidence of granite shadow and the Ascension Protocol sits preserved for future generations. A reminder of how close we came to disaster and how the quiet courage of ordinary men saved us from ourselves. And in laboratories across the country, scientists study the material that almost changed history for the worse, working to ensure it changes the future for the better. The shadow gives way to light, the forgotten duty remembered, the torch passed on. Wow. 1 year later, Marcus stands at his uncle's grave. It's a simple marker in the Pinecrest Cemetery, now adorned with a small American flag and a fresh military honor plaque recognizing his service. Beside it, a newer stone bears his father's name. The remains recovered from Sentinel Ridge were finally laid to rest with full military honors, attended by representatives from the Pentagon, the White House, and a small contingent of aging veterans who had served in SAC during the Cold War. Marcus kneels, brushes leaves from both graves. The autumn air is crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding hills. In the distance, Sentinel Ridge rises against the sky. No longer abandoned now, a secure research facility operated jointly by the Department of Energy and a civilian oversight board. The Daybreak Project has expanded, yielding breakthroughs in quantum computing and medical imaging. The first cancer patient treated with rhodium-103 enhanced therapy went into remission last month. More trials are underway. A weapon transformed into a healing tool, a secret turned to public benefit, a legacy redeemed. Marcus places a small object on each grave, replica keys cast in bronze symbolic of the real key that unlock the truth after 60 years. Then he rises, straightens his janitor's uniform, and walks back toward his truck. Tonight he'll review the latest Daybreak progress reports. Tomorrow he'll mop the floors at Eagle Point High, fix a leaky pipe in the boys' bathroom, prepare the gymnasium for Friday's basketball game. Ordinary work. Essential work. His phone rings. Sullivan calling from Washington. The president signed the commendation. She tells him without preamble, "Your father and uncle will receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously next month." They would have hated that, Marcus says, but there's a smile in his voice. Probably, Sullivan agrees, but it's not for them. It's for history, for the record. I know. Marcus reaches his truck, starts the engine. Will you be there? Wouldn't miss it, Sullivan assures him. The Daybreak team, too. They want to meet the man who made their work possible. I didn't do anything, Marcus says, the familiar refrain. You delivered the message, Sullivan reminds him. You finished what they started. Marcus looks back at the cemetery, at the graves of his father and uncle, two ordinary men who made an extraordinary choice when it mattered most. Then he shifts his truck into gear and heads toward town, toward the school that needs its janitor, toward the future his family helped secure. The janitor drives on, leaving the past behind him, honored, preserved, ready for whatever comes next. His father would understand, his uncle would approve. And somewhere in laboratories across America, scientists examine samples of rhodium-103, marveling at its properties, imagining how it might heal rather than harm, connect rather than destroy, build rather than tear down. The shadow gives way to light, the forgotten duty remembered, the torch passed on. And in the quiet corners of the world, ordinary people continue to make the choice that defines democracy, to put principle above power, law and above expediency, constitution above convenience. Some duties are never forgotten. Some inheritances are more than land or buildings. Some legacies continue in the daily choice to do what's right, especially when no one is watching. Marcus Reynolds, janitor, guardian, heir to a heroic tradition, drives toward tomorrow. Invisible to most essential to all, carrying the flame his father and uncle lit during the darkest days of the Cold War. The flame of quiet courage, of steadfast principle, of forgotten duty remembered when it matters most. The torch passed on. History is full of quiet heroes, men and women who made the right choice when it mattered most without fanfare or recognition. The story of Marcus Reynolds and his family reminds us that sometimes the greatest acts of patriotism happen not on battlefields, but in moments of moral clarity, when ordinary people choose principle over expediency. The Cuban Missile Crisis has long been studied as a triumph of diplomacy, a moment when cooler heads prevailed at the brink of catastrophe. Now we know it was also a test of our constitutional system, a test that was passed not by powerful leaders, but by two soldiers who remembered their true duty. Rhodium 103 has found its rightful place, not as a weapon of war, but as a tool for healing. The Daybreak Initiative has already revolutionized cancer treatment protocols, with survival rates for previously terminal cases improving by over 60%. What was designed to destroy has been transformed into something that saves lives. Alexander Blackwood served 3 years under house arrest before a presidential pardon cut short his sentence. The Blackwood Defense Technologies Corporation continues under strict government oversight, its resources now dedicated to medical and civilian applications of advanced materials. Even the darkest legacies can find redemption when guided toward the light. The Declassification Commission completed its work in 2028, releasing the full Granite Shadow and Ascension files to the public archives, not as a source of division or shame, but as a reminder of the vigilance democracy requires, even from within. Our system isn't perfect, but it endures because ordinary citizens uphold its principles when institutions falter. Lieutenant James Reynolds and Colonel Robert Reynolds received posthumous Presidential Medals of Freedom in a White House ceremony attended by surviving veterans of Strategic Air Command. Their gravestones in Pinecrest bear a simple inscription: "They chose Constitution over orders. They remembered their duty." As for Marcus Reynolds, he still pushes his mop through the halls of Eagle Point High School 3 days a week. The other two he consults with the Daybreak team, ensuring that his family's legacy serves the cause of peace rather than war. Some find his choice incomprehensible. A man who could have fame and fortune choosing instead the quiet dignity of essential work. But those who understand know that heroism takes many forms. Sometimes it's standing up when everyone else sits down. Sometimes it's speaking truth when lies are easier. And sometimes it's simply doing the necessary work that keeps our world turning, the invisible essential labor that makes everything else possible. The torch passes from generation to generation, the forgotten duty remembered. The American experiment continues not because our systems are perfect, but because enough good people choose to do what's right even when, especially when, no one is watching. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new technologies, new tests of our principles. But as long as there are people willing to put duty above self-interest, constitution above convenience, truth above comfort, we will face those challenges together as one American family. The key is and always has been in the family.